It's just anxiety, you're burned out, try an antidepressant. Oh, you're a mom, of course you're tired. What if your anxiety isn't mental, it's actually microbial? What if your fatigue isn't hormonal, it's hypoxia?
The information shared on the Rethink It podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice. While Dr. Sande is a licensed medical provider, the content of this podcast is not a substitute for professional medical diagnosis, treatment, or advice specific to your individual health needs. Always consult with your healthcare provider before making any decisions related to your health or medical care.
Welcome back to the Rethink It podcast, the podcast where we challenge what you think you know about brain health, longevity, and healing. We're not here to chase symptoms or hand out quick fix Band-Aids. We are here to ask better questions. We rethink pharmaceuticals as the first answer. We explore cutting-edge natural science, and most importantly, we empower you to partner with your body's innate healing wisdom. In today's episode, it's one that I like to call Your Brain on Bugs, Epstein-Barr, Babesia, and the silent attack on your cognition. If you've ever felt like your brain was inflamed and your memory is fading, or your emotions just won't let you feel like you anymore, this episode is for you, especially if your labs keep coming back as normal, but you know there's something else wrong. Today we're digging in a little deeper into stealth infections. We talk about these a lot on this podcast, but we've spent a lot of time on Lyme, and today we're digging in specifically to Epstein-Barr and the parasite Babesia. And we are going to talk about how they quietly disrupt your brain function, your energy, your cognition. And we'll also talk about how you can fight back naturally and effectively without relying on medications that basically just mask your symptoms. So with all that said, let's dive in. So let's meet the bugs. We have Epstein-Barr and Babesia on display today. Epstein-Barr is notably one of those very famous and well-known bugs. Most people have heard of it. It is often dismissed as the monovirus, but it's so much more than that. Over 95% of people have been infected with the monovirus, the Epstein-Barr virus, usually during childhood. And while the immune system usually keeps it dormant, Epstein-Barr has a sneaky way of reactivating, especially during times of stress, illness, toxic exposure, and immune dysregulation. It was interesting. I recently did this straw poll because as you know, I'm writing a book. We're going to cover the holistic methods that we can use to prepare and recover from anesthesia. And I kept hearing, well, I was never the same after my epidural. And I thought that was interesting because I wasn't really thinking epidurals or spinals as a problem when I was writing this book. I was really more concerned about the cognitive impacts of general anesthesia. But I was curious because I'd heard it enough that I wanted to get a bigger straw poll from a larger group of people. And so I posted in a very large group that I'm a member of online, probably, 20,000 members or a pretty large sample size. So I posted on there, hey, here's the deal. I'm an anesthesia provider. I'm trying to understand, what people mean by when they say that they're never the same after anesthesia when they have their epidurals, because it doesn't make sense to me as an anesthesia provider. It's one of the safest things we can do. Epidurals are. And what was interesting was that several people actually posted that I got really, really, really sick after my epidural. And, we don't know what had happened. Like I was physically sick, like flu-like symptoms sick. And one lady said, and I was like, this doesn't make sense. I'm kind of curious. And I'm not going to finish the story because you have to read the book to figure out what I concluded on the total topic of that. But the point is that one lady actually said, I got sick and I went to my functional doctor and they discovered that my Epstein-Barr had reactivated. And so I was like, this is interesting. I don't necessarily think that was due to the epidural alone. I do think that was times of stress, illness, and toxic exposure and immune dysregulation. There's nothing more stressful than having a baby. So it could have been the epidural contributing somewhat to that potentially. But more likely, it was a combination of the whole experience of birth and delivery. So anyway, that was my side. But I want to point out some research highlights. So back in 2022, there was a study published in Science, the journal Science, that showed that Epstein-Barr reactivation is the triggering event of over about 90% of multiple sclerosis cases. And the increasing MS risk was a staggering 32-fold. That's an enormous risk increase. So Epstein-Barr is not just the monovirus. The reactivation can cause major autoimmune triggers. Other research linked to Epstein-Barr includes things like autoimmune diseases like Hashimoto's and lupus, chronic fatigue syndrome, certainly cancers. That's where the interesting research lies. I find this very fascinating that cancers like Hodgkin's lymphoma and nasopharyngeal carcinoma, they are specifically tied to Epstein-Barr untreated stealth infections. So what does it do to the brain? Because this is the brain podcast, right? Epstein-Barr actually activates these specific inflammatory pathways called NF-kappa beta KB, NF-KB. And it causes disruption of the mitochondrial function, which then, of course, leads to lower production of ATP, your energy producer. And it also depletes tryptophan, which leaves you back to our serotonin episode, serotonin deficient and exhausted. So this is an actual serotonin deficiency triggered by a depletion of the substrate that makes your serotonin and stimulated by inflammation triggered by Epstein-Barr. So that leads you feeling certain very specific, very common Epstein-Barr type symptoms, and they include brain fog and poor memory. You got crash days. You're good, you crash. And then not only that, you crash, but when you sleep, you're not really refreshed after sleeping. Other symptoms would be anxiety, irritability, kind of being emotionally like up and down, waking up at around 2 to 4 in the morning for no good reason. That's an Epstein-Barr reaction. Swollen glands or feeling off, even without a fever, like you're not mounting a fever, you just feel off. The swollen glands thing, I remember when I was a kid, I had this huge swollen gland in the back of my neck, and I always thought it was weird. I used to play with it, be like, "What? That's a weird little spot there." It would, a smarter kid might have told their mom, but leave it to me. I didn't. And it's only been since I've been doing my sauna, taking my own advice and clearing all these bugs that has gone away. And a lot of the symptoms that I just listed that I had have improved, including some autoimmune symptoms I had. Also switch gears to Babesia. Babesia is an interesting little critter. It's actually a tick-borne parasite. So ticks don't just carry Lyme, they carry lots of bugs. Babesia is definitely one of them, and it is a parasite that invades your red blood cells. It's a very common co-infection with Lyme disease, as is Bartonella and even Epstein-Barr. Think of it like malaria's cousin, but a little harder to detect. When Babesia invades your red blood cells, it reduces the oxygen delivery to your brain and everywhere else. That really can cause a lot of neurologic symptoms. That can make you feel disoriented. It can absolutely lead to the chronic fatigue and the tiredness that you feel. And it can make your brain feel like it's moving through molasses, like it just won't go. Okay, like, you know that feeling? I've felt it before. So not that I don't know that I have Babesia. I never tested for Babesia, but I know the feeling of my brain moving through molasses. That is for sure. There is actually a study, this is a review in the infectious disease reports in 2023 that found Babesia in 40% of patients with unexplained chronic fatigue and neurologic symptoms. Whoa. And that is despite being testing negative on the traditional lab panels. Where labs are normal. There are some pretty obvious symptoms of Babesia. These are very common, and so I'll just kind of give you an idea in case you're feeling any of these. You might want to take note. But the most common one I would say is air hunger. It's like this: I can't get enough oxygen. I just gotta take deeper breaths. I gotta take deep breaths all the time. That's it. I'm really starving for air feeling. It's a parasite, so a lot of times parasites tend to cause night sweats. So, this is one of those, could be Babesia, might be another parasite, but it's certainly linked to night sweats, which is concerning. Dizziness or feeling kind of like floaty, that's a weird symptom from Babesia. Word finding problems. I know you guys have heard me have issues with that on this podcast, so forgive me, but I don't have Babesia. It's just because I work too hard. Okay. But word finding problems is linked to Babesia. Heart palpitations. I mean, we see that a lot in Lyme as well, but it is certainly something because of its link to the destruction and dysfunction of your red blood cells. There's certainly some cardiac symptoms that you're going to get from Babesia, especially in postural changes, which is kind of the unique hallmark with Babesia. So those people with POTS could be Babesia as a root cause. Okay. Feeling disconnected from your surroundings is another kind of neurological kind of off feeling associated with Babesia. So it isn't just fatigue that you're feeling when you have these symptoms. It's actual neurological oxygen deprivation. So how these pathogens, these bugs, these critters, how they hijack the brain is a little bit interesting. And I want to go into that a little bit because, why does it affect the brain so much, and what can I do? It's all linked to like how these bugs work. And so when we go into let's look at Epstein-Barr, for example. Epstein-Barr, EBV, hides in your B cells. So that's part of your immune system. It hides in there and then alters the immune regulation and the immune function. And that's crazy. It activates chronic inflammation through that NF-kappa beta, the NF-kB that we talked about. It's a whole specific part of the immune inflammatory response. And we will be talking about inflammation, how you can address inflammation, and why anti-inflammatories are bad coming up soon. So stay tuned for that. Epstein-Barr also ends up disrupting that serotonin and dopamine production through that hijacking of tryptophan that we talked about. And of course, we talked about how it inhibits like the mitochondrial function, leading to less energy in the brain being produced. And so then we get all those symptoms. Okay, Babesia basically invades the red blood cells, leading to less oxygen delivery. Your blood can be flowing great to your brain, but the oxygen being delivered to the brain is less efficient. And then it also interesting. This is really interesting to a person who works in the OR and constantly does things. We're always working on people with blood clotting problems and things like that. This actually increases your vascular permeability. What that means is it allows things to transfer through the membrane of your blood vessels, pass through that shouldn't pass through, and specifically the blood-brain barrier. So it causes some disruption of your blood-brain barrier, leading to not only Babesia causing its own set of problems, directly on the brain, but also allowing more garbage to pass through into the brain that shouldn't be, that the blood-brain barrier was there to protect against. Of course, it like the Epstein-Barr, it produces sort of this cytokine inflammatory response, and this specifically, Babesia specifically leads to cytokine storm. We saw this a lot in COVID, by the way. So the cytokine storm then leads to kind of this neuroinflammation and the brain fog and the fatigue. So if you can imagine, like, your brain is a city, okay? Epstein-Barr cuts the power to the grid, and Babesia clogs the roads and slows oxygen delivery. So no wonder if you have any of these bugs, you are struggling to think clearly or feel like yourself. There was a journal in 2021, the Journal of Neuroinflammation, that explains that chronic infection-driven microglial activation, I'll explain that in a minute, is a precursor to neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Your microglia are the kind of immune responders in the brain that will drag in white blood cells, and ultimately they also lead to some scar tissue. So you can imagine if we've got a bunch of white blood cells in there doing a lot of work and laying down scar tissue, that we might get some abnormal protein folding, as is seen in Alzheimer's. We might also get some destruction of neural pathways if we're laying down a bunch of scar tissue in a brain. That's not what we want. We don't want our microglia activated. That's a bad thing. So they kind of link this chronic infection-driven thing to that microglial activation, which can lead to not just your immediate brain fog that you're dealing with right now, but actually the degenerative problems like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. So that's a problem. So let's talk about real symptoms and sometimes the misdiagnosed lives that we lead when we have these bugs persisting. This is where things get real personal. Most patients with these infections are often, I don't want to say misdiagnosed because I don't diagnose or treat anything, but here's the thing. They get a diagnosis that's a label that doesn't actually answer the question of what caused the diagnosis. Let's just say that, okay? You might have heard it's just anxiety, you're burned out, try an antidepressant. Oh, you're a mom, of course you're tired. But those are like surface explanations that don't really get to the root cause. What if your anxiety isn't mental, it's actually microbial? What if your fatigue isn't hormonal, it's hypoxia? Hey guys, I wanted to pop in and interrupt our podcast to encourage you guys and let you guys know, if you didn't know, our book is available. Stephen's story about his struggle through Lyme disease. Our book, Kids Get Lyme Disease Too, One Boy's Journey of Trusting God Through Lyme Disease. It is available on all areas that you can get books, everything from Amazon to Barnes & Noble to everywhere in between. All the places that you pick up books, you can pick up our book. So please support us and get the word out. If you have a child that's struggling, it doesn't have to be Lyme. I know so many children who just feel weird because their health doesn't match that of their peers, and they feel isolated, they feel unseen, frustrated, and alone. This book is meant to encourage those children. It's meant to encourage you parents that you can get through it. It's meant to make you feel seen and heard and give you hope. So please pick up our book. Thank you so much for supporting our podcast and all the things that we do. You can see it's an ever emerging thing. I'm changing my studio. Today I'm wearing scrubs because this is the only time I've had to record, and I'm doing the best we can. And I appreciate that you guys are here with me at the root level, at the ground floor, as I'm trying to get information out to you guys that is valuable and hopefully life-changing, starting with the book. So pick up the book wherever you can pick up books, and thank you in advance for all your support. So common neuroimmune symptoms of Epstein-Barr and Babesia, we've covered them. I mean, they cause short-term memory loss, mood swings, depression, emotional flatness, difficulty handling bright lights and loud sounds in crowds. So you start feeling agoraphobic, or you start want to be really introverted and you didn't used to be one. Your brain shuts down during stress. Literally, you can't handle it. You just shut down. You lose your word recall. Even some of these odd symptoms like depersonalization, like you're living your life outside of your body, those are linked to that. Dysautonomia, that's the pot stuff, dizziness, irregular heartbeats, GI issues. Those are all part of the dysautonomia. And people often get diagnosed with, like we said, lupus and MS. And although those symptoms may be consistent with that diagnosis, it still doesn't answer what caused the diagnosis. The bugs are that answer in a lot of the time. So something to explore if those are diagnoses that you've been given. This is a silent epidemic, and the standard medical model isn't really looking for it. So how do we fight back naturally and kind of holistically? Let's get back to some hope here. I hope you're feeling seen and empowered and not discouraged. It is frustrating. Nothing is perfect in this world, but these are things that you can be looking for if you have any of the symptoms I mentioned. So where we start with, where we bring in the hope, is we start by calming the fire. What do I mean? We got to bring the inflammation down. Chronic infections lead to chronic inflammation, leads to disease. True disease that started with an infection, right? So there's a lot of good herbal products that support that. I would be looking at curcumin and boswellia, resveratrol. Those all support like that inflammatory cytokine storm stuff that happens. Special pro-resolving mediators. These are really great products that really shut the communication cycle down for inflammation. The next step would be to target your bugs. So, it is never a treatment that is unifocal. If you ever go to a holistic practitioner and all they're giving you are B vitamin C and magnesium, though those are important and a very important part of this treatment, and maybe they throw some curcumin at you, and then they give you a bunch of other things that kind of help your thyroid and help your this, help you that. They are not necessarily getting to your root cause. You've gotta deal with all of it at once. You gotta support the immune system, bring down the inflammation, and get after the bugs, all kind of at the same time, which makes these protocols where you're getting good recovery and seeing progress look complex, and frustratingly long. Like you shouldn't have a protocol that's 5 products. Not if you're dealing with these bugs. I'd love that to be the case, but it is very rarely the case. So step 2 would be you got to target those pathogens in a proper order. There is an order to it. We kind of deal with the Lyme, and then we get the co-infections, and we get these other bugs that sort of come out with the co-infections dying off and biofilm being disrupted. But Epstein-Barr, what really responds well for Epstein-Barr would be things like monolaurin, lysine. I love olive leaf intrinsic. It's a great product for Epstein-Barr. Babesia is a parasite, so it responds to parasite types of herbal products like artemisinin and cryptolepis and black walnut and things like that. And you got to deal with the biofilms, because if you've ever heard me talk about those bugs love to hide under domes, protective domes that like they set up camp under. There was this show back in, I don't remember, it was 2019 that I was watching this. I think it was called The Dome. And this dome pops up, some extraterrestrial dome that like blocks a town inside of the dome, and nobody can get out and go in. And it's crazy. But I think of that all the time because it's a good visual for what's happening in the body. You got these domes and parasites that are thriving in there, living, breathing, moving, doing, pooping, peeing, and doing all their things inside this dome. And nothing could penetrate the dome in that show. And very few, no antibiotics successfully do the job of penetrating that dome. And this is where enzyme support helps break those type of things up, as well as complex herbal products. So think about the bugs, think about the dome they live in. We got to break those things up in order to get to them. It's really important when you're doing this that you actually do work with somebody, because it can be hard. When you go to kill those bugs fight back sometimes, especially parasites. And so, it can feel like you're going backwards instead of forward when we're going after the bugs and they're starting to die. But there can be other things that we do for support. So again, you gotta do a lot of things at the same time so that the body can keep functioning while we're going after things that are trying to destroy it. So one of the things you can do is restore, like, kind of support your brain energy through this process, because you're going to have more demand on ATP while we're trying to heal and the immune system's balancing. So there are a couple of things we can do there, and that's, that's back to your energy producing kind of supplements like your CoQ10, your PQQ, your L-carnitine. This type of things really help with your mitochondrial support. Your magnesium, and more magnesium. Lion's mane's a great choice for energy support. I love alpha GPC and glutathione, and those type of things are all really great support for the brain and energy through this process. And then the last piece is really to kind of work at the same time. It's a lot of work, it sounds like, but it's doable. You got to work on your nervous system balance. That's fight or flight, rest and digest balance. So how do we do that? Well, we've got to go into our basics again. The ones that I challenge you at the very beginning of the podcast, when I first started this in my desk over there, and I was barely piecing things together. And I thank you for hanging in there. You organic people that love new people trying to do stuff that they're not comfortable doing. That's me. But we talked about these basic reset tools that you can do, and that includes that grounding. Remember the grounding challenge I did on my second podcast? Grounding, put your feet on the ground, connect to the earth, Schumann resonance. It helps balance our heart, our body's frequencies. God placed us in the garden, in it, naked. Okay, so get your body grounded. You need the sunlight. You need the sunlight specifically in the morning and at night. There's actually hormonal systems that are stimulated by that. You need to take time and be quiet. You need that de-stress. You need to separate from busy crowds and lots of brain activity. You need that time to reset. Prayer is a really powerful tool in that. And then, of course, some cold exposure is good. Not maybe early on is good for stress adaptation, but I would kind of go slow on that. It's not something I throw in there early. Believe it or not, humming is one of my favorite things. Humming and gargling. Why? Because when we're dealing with Babesia, remember, it is an oxygen starver. And what you do when you hum and you gargle, first of all, you stimulate the vagus nerve, but you also stimulate some cells here back in the posterior pharynx that are awesome nitric oxide producing cells. They make this beautiful molecule, nitric oxide, that basically dilates the blood flow to your lungs. Very cool, because that means more blood going to the lungs, means more oxygen being carried by blood. Okay, so those suckers, that's a really good way to do it. Cold exposure, not cold exposure, humming and gargling. Those things have powerful effects both on the vagus nerve and on nitric oxide production. And then, of course, I said it, and I always say it, my easiest hack to grab into doing kind of vagus nerve stimulation is just daily using essential oils, clean ones, clean, non-synthetic essential oils that are really actually effective. Those are versatile and useful for helping support that vagal tone. And of course, the last thing I would say on this piece, on resetting that nervous system and supporting it, is check out your EMF exposure. I bet you got a lot. If you do, I encourage you to touch base. I'll put the contact in my podcast show notes for the person I recommend you go to help guide you through what products you could potentially use to help offset EMF exposure, because it's around you all the time. Of course, magnesium is going to help protect your calcium channels from overstimulation from EMF, but at the same time, we're being bombarded significantly everywhere all the time. And so in today's world with 5G everywhere, like a mile apart from one another, you need to be doing EMF mitigation. And no, I don't recommend those fancy, the ones that have all the ads with the fancy jewelry. I recommend the basic support tools, and I will put the link for the resource in the show notes. You can reach out to that person and get her guidance on what products you need. And then, of course, sleep rhythm regulation. So a lot of times, if your practitioner's helping you through all this, they're going to give you products that help you sleep, because you're probably also disrupted here, making all the things that help you sleep. You're probably starting at the ground level and it's going to take time. So we got to get you to sleep while we work on getting your body to naturally go to sleep. So there's going to be some herbal products probably that you would use for that, melatonin and 5-HTP and even essential oils and things like that, to really get your nervous system calm and get you off to sleep, and so that your brain can drain the toxins and you can recover. So I'm going to leave you with asking a question. What is one thing you can do this week to start healing your body's terrain? The terrain means all the bugs that live cohesively in the garden together of your body. What is one thing you can do this week? I want to leave you remembering that you are not crazy. You are not weak. You are not lazy. It is hard to move when you can't get oxygen to your brain because of a stealth infection like Babesia. You might just be under attack from something stealthy and very real. And now you know what to look for. You can rethink it. And just to recap, Epstein-Barr and Babesia are hidden drivers for cognitive decline. They are often missed in standard medicine. We don't look for it. I don't ever remember being taught to look for it. I don't ever remember seeing tests for that. I remember seeing tests for Lyme, but not these. Your symptoms may be real signals of a deeper issue, not just a lack of serotonin, okay? And you can fight back with the right anti-inflammatory lifestyle, herbal support, and nervous system regulation. And if this episode gave you hope and clarity, please share it with someone you love, post it on the socials, and start the conversation. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and most importantly, stay empowered.